Welcome to Customer Driven with Chad McDaniel. Well known throughout the customer leadership industry, Chad has been the chief community leader for Execs in the Know, one of the top executive customer advocacy groups on the planet. With a passion for customer success and a desire to share and develop best practices, Chad's conversations with industry leaders aim to give unfiltered, unplugged access to industry peers who are customer obsessed, just like you. If you enjoy the show, please be sure to rate and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Now here's your host, Chad McDaniel.
Welcome, everyone. This is Chad McDaniel with another episode of Customer Driven with Chad McDaniel. I have continued the series of women in CX leadership and really advocating the tremendous amount of success this industry has, an opportunity, the way the CX industry is impacting so many lives in so many different ways. We as customer leaders have that ability day in and day out with our customers and their successes, and even with our own employee experiences. But I am thrilled to continue to highlight some of the absolute incredible talent that I think this this industry has with the female leadership. And with me today, I have the pleasure of Lorraine Schumacher. Lorraine, I've known you for a while. I can't remember when it was, maybe 5-6 years ago. This is, I think, when you were at Verizon.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I really was excited when I had the chance to meet you a number of years ago, I was impressed with your view on customer. I was impressed with your thought leadership and just your insights and perspectives. And I don't think I've seen you in a little bit, but I've never forgotten you and kind of the impression you brought upon me in the discussions we had back a few years ago. But what I'd love to do with our audience right now, Lorraine, is for you to kind of tell us a bit about the background. Let's put it in a stage and put it into perspective and, talk a little bit about that. And then let's get started.
That's great. Absolutely. So, I guess if you want me to talk about how I got to where I am today, I'm a little long in the tooth. I'm not at the beginning of my career. But the best part of getting to where I am in my career today is that I did have multiple roles. Some were CX related. Some, quite frankly, for a while, I even worked in IT. I did over 22 years at Verizon. And that type of education and experience is not really anything you can pay for. Right. So if you have a passion for what you're doing and you look at all the opportunities that different roles can give you, that actually puts you in a place that as you get a little further in your career, you can actually start to pick and choose the things that you're most passionate about. And although it may have been a long and winding road, to quote the song, I'm very happy with where I've ended up and the experiences that I've had along the way. I've gotten to meet people, quite frankly, like you, Chad, that, no matter how many years go by, you can create an incredible network about your passions within your business.
So in 22 years at Verizon, I know there's a number of things you did over those years and how you were impacting customer engagement and success. Where are you currently now for our listeners? Tell us a bit about your current role, the company, and what that company does.
Absolutely. So I currently work for a company called Clarabridge. And I like to tell everybody who will listen to me that I have the best job in the world right now. I get to do what I love about customer experience, and I get to help a phenomenal software company to help other companies with their CEM across a myriad of industries. So, for example, we could be working with manufacturers on a Monday and a retailer on a Friday, and it's B2B, B2C. And Clarabridge, if you are not already familiar with the company, started out as a text analytics company about 10 years ago. And we're now a full-blown CEM, customer experience management, where we look at natural language processing, emotion, sentiment, and quite frankly, even effort, right? That's a big thing in CX today. And we're able to derive effort scores. And the reality is that when you take all of this data and all of this structured and unstructured data, put it together across all of your channels. That's where you really get to the depth of what's going on with your customers and how do you inform those journey maps? How do you make business changes, policy changes, and how do you actually improve that customer experience from cradle to grave across all of your touch points, not siloed? Sorry if I got a little too detailed there, but I love what I do.
Absolutely. And it shows. And I really say, I think your title's CX Evangelist or CEM Evangelist.
Exactly.
Briefly, what does that mean in your work?
So it actually means I am truly an evangelist. I get to do things like I am here with you today. I get to help companies that are either clients or prospects of Clarabridge. I go and I speak at conferences and I just kind of share my opinion, share my thought leadership, my wealth of knowledge, right? I've got a couple scars from having done the job that many people that are probably listening to this podcast want to do for a living. And so the job is really to help other people. So it could be a little bit altruistic, but yes, I do get paid for it and I love it.
Well, as we go through the podcast here today, I'll make sure for our listeners towards the end that if you want to reach out to Lorraine or get in touch with her, and based on some of her career successes and leadership, she is a true evangelist for this industry, and I highly recommend you get in touch with her. But with that said, before we get into some leadership and some other aspects, Lorraine, really execs in the know, for those that are not aware of, we are a very large customer brand community of sharing best practices and insights, really what we call leaders learning from leaders. And I've been running this community for the last 10 years and been absolutely blessed with meeting some of the best, brightest minds this industry has to offer, and seeing the change evolution that continues to take place with customer expectations, how we're evolving in so many different variations. My question, Lorraine, to you is, from your set of lens, and you see it from so many different perspectives, because we're all about customer, and this podcast is all about customer, what do you kind of see as the current state of the customer experience industry? What's kind of on the mind? What are we grappling with? What are we dealing with? We're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but why I have you, I would just love to get your perspective of current state and thoughts towards the CX industry.
Absolutely. I think we've come a really long way in 10 years. There's always more to go. But if you think back 10 years ago, people thought of customer experience as an acronym or a synonym for customer service. And they really only thought about what happens if you call an 800 number. And we've made great strides in getting both clients and customers and employees to really understand that experience is holistic, right? It's not one single touch point. And with that acknowledgement, we are able to make major transformational changes with companies, but it also comes with its own little set of complexity, where people have to now break down their silos and move a little bit further to look holistically. But I think just the fact that we're acknowledging it, and that CX is a real thing now, right? It's not just a buzzword. It's been around for probably more than 10 years. But it's moving up that maturity curve. It's a discipline now. And I'm very happy to see that. I think our biggest challenge right now is that many companies have put a lot of effort and money into customer experience, but we're starting to plateau a little. And there's multiple reasons for that. That's probably a whole nother conversation. But the challenge is it's always going to change, right? And we've always got to start stepping up our game because that's what customers expect from us.
It really is a whole nother topic that we clearly could use additional series on. And, one of the things Execs in the Know in 2019 is going to be very active in the number of things we're doing to continue to be the community advocate of the customer experience executive like yourself, Lorraine. But it's good to get your feedback on that. Thank you for taking a couple of minutes. And one of the goals, Lorraine, that I really wanted to do in this podcast series about really highlighting the success of women in CX leadership is to inspire not only future generations, but also to inspire the current state of people in this industry, or maybe people outside of the industry that are thinking about this as a great way for career. We have a lot of ways to impact, as I said earlier, customers' lives and be involved in so many different ways. And on that thought of leadership, Lorraine, because it's been your passion, you've been in this for the maturity of it all, and we've all been together in it in different ways, but I really want to get your view on leadership. What advice, recommendations, suggestions would you want to give towards this industry and some of the CX competencies in leadership?
Yeah, so I think my view on leadership, no matter what discipline you're in, right, is that leadership comes naturally. I don't want to say you either have it or you don't, but you have to have that fire in your belly. You have to have a passion for helping others. We can always hone our skills, right? There's a myriad of ways that we can always get better at what we're doing. But I truly believe that every leader really wants to help others succeed in their core being. And very often, some of the best leaders out there, some of the best leaders I've ever worked for, have been true mentors. And they spend as much time, if not more time, promoting and helping their peer team and the people that work for them for the good of the whole and the team's success than they do their own status. If you think about there's many leadership books out there, and I, at the risk of making some people laugh, I think my favorite one from way back in the 80s is The Leadership Secrets of Attila the Hun. And really to take an entire book and boil it down to leadership, in 10 seconds or less, is that he was successful because he had his fireside chats and he inspired, his warriors to go forth and conquer. And although it's a bit of a tongue in cheek, to me, that truly is the core of leadership is your passion, and your heart is in helping others, whether it be your customers and or the people that you work with.
And I think I was taking notes, obviously, and I subscribe again to a lot of the things you've said as we've all reflected. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are nodding their heads in agreement and have similar reflection and thought process on it, and in agreement and well said as that goes, Lorraine. Your career success as an industry leader, though, let's bring it specific into not just the philosophy, but in your specific career in the CX industry. Can you tell me a little bit more about that direct career success?
Absolutely. I think one of the first times that I realized that I needed to move forth in my career was I was working on the marketing side of the house with Verizon. People may have heard this story before, but I was reprimanded frequently because I was always looking on the technology side of the house to find ways to make the experience better for the customer. Now, think back, this is almost 30 years ago at this point, right? And we didn't think about the overall customer experience at that point. We only thought about technology of moving from point A to point B. So then I actually went ahead and made a huge leap in a career move and moved over to the technology side of the house. And one of the first things I learned there was that they worried about specs back in the day. And so I came in and said, hey, but what's the customer thinking about this? And it really, believe it or not, I accidentally tripped over how to revolutionize some of the things that our company was doing from a technology perspective that were inadvertently not promoting the customer experience. And so you can learn throughout a career path of being in something new that doesn't necessarily point to what you think your role should be. But those successes and failures, as you start to bring them all together, you move up in the company, you get recognized, your voice gets heard. And I think for me, it was really about the perseverance of always having that commitment to the customer, no matter what role I was in. I ended up being a PMO. I'm a certified PMP, did lots of project management. But you're even then at that point thinking about your internal customers, all the other people on the team that you're working with. And as you have success in those areas, those are the things that will help propel you higher in your organization and to get you into a true leadership position.
And again, listeners, you're listening to Lorraine Schumacher. She is with Clarabridge, a CX Evangelist, 22 years of dynamic customer leadership at Verizon. Lorraine, what would be the core competencies do you see to be a CX leader? For those that are in the industry or are thinking about it, what do you see as some of the core competencies in this space?
It's about three different things, right? It's about the passion, your empathy for customers, right? That has to be a given. Those are table stakes. But then you really need to be somewhat analytical, extremely organized, and you really need to be able to take your tasks or your KPIs on a daily basis and bridge that gap between what's best for the customer, what does the customer want, and the financial acumen. And let's face it, everybody's in business to make money, right? So you've got to be able to have a competency analytically, organizationally, and financially. And then I think the last piece is, you've got to be a salesperson. Not necessarily that you're selling an individual product with a quota and a revenue, but you need to be able to sell yourself, your program, and your results, both internally within your own company, right? Anytime you have a great win, you want to make sure people know about that. Be a little bit self-promoting. And then make sure that externally within networks, within organizations like Execs in the Know, those are great opportunities to sell yourself externally and to network with others that are along your same career path.
One thing I have found too is that not only I find the industry extremely welcoming and friendly, there is so much opportunity to self-learn, self-train information. It really is an embracing industry, and I'm just absolutely blessed and fortunate to have been associated to it for the number of years. I've really enjoyed it, and I think it's a great opportunity for us, all of us, in so many different ways. And Lorraine, I do appreciate your perspective on some of those core competencies. I think it's also important, though, we learn from failures or lessons learned. And with the time we have, if we could just throw a couple of those in there for our audience, what would be some of those lessons learned or failures that maybe we could learn from?
Absolutely. Without going into, gory detail about the failures and what the financial impacts are, I think that anytime you have something that doesn't turn out positively, it's a learning for you. And B, quite frankly, some of these things you hit yourself in the head like, oh gosh, I could have had a V8. Like, oh gosh, why didn't I think about that? And I think any time that you have a program, a project, or even a goal within a meeting or a presentation that does not go well, the learning there is that there's always more than one way to accomplish something. And sometimes there are things that I would call a happy accident. There was one program that I was working on where we couldn't get the project to physically work from a customer perspective the way we wanted it to. But we found out based on feedback that the way it was working was actually what the customer wanted and not what we thought the customer wanted. So those kind of failures are great learnings. I can be honest with you. There was a point in my career where I had what I would call a major career failure. I was in a role that I thought I wanted, and I was miserable. I was not delivering to the expectations of both myself and the company. But what it taught me was that you can still be with the same company, the same corporation. And those failures will help you find the right place to be.
Great advice. And I think we got a new phrase to coin. You call it the happy accident.
Yeah.
I like that. We'll put that in the show notes. So again, just for my knowledge, the happy accident in the failure side of it, that meant to you?
So it meant to me that we were actually successful, even though that program and project did not bring to the table what we had intended it to.
Well, I am positive all of us will have many examples where we could create our own happy accidents and outline them as such. So, love that term and that
No
clarification
problem.
with it. Thanks, Lorraine. I'm a big, and I've said this in the podcast series itself, as I really think that learning about what people read, what literature, what books, what influences them in their own, not career thinking, but just their own ways of how they guide and lead their lives and also nurture and mentor in our industry. I know you had alluded a little bit earlier back, I think in the, I don't know if it was in the 80s, but you had mentioned Leadership Secrets of Altilda the Hun. So thank you for bringing that up earlier. But I'm going to ask you the question I really want to ask, Lorraine, and for our listeners, what would be good recommended readings for our industry and you would really want to bestow upon the listenership?
Absolutely. So I think from a customer experience perspective, there's the standard textbooks that you can't move up in this part of the industry without having read, Gene Bliss's CCO, The Ultimate Question, right? NPS. I still, to this day, about a month ago went back and reread NPS 2.0. The Effortless Experience, Matt Dixon, that's a great one to go back. Those to me are the CX standards. But when you want to look at leadership, Gene's new book, Would You Do That to Your Mother? It's a little tongue in cheek. It's very light reading. But as you digest it, it really gets you to the core of not only thinking about CX in general, but how do you as a leader operate? So I think that's a great one. And then I have two other books that I'm actually reading right now. One is written by a friend of mine named Chris Barron, and the book is called Fearless Leader. It's not very daunting. It's something you can carry in your backpack with your PC and read when you get a little bit of time, easy to digest. And then another one, it's a little bit older book, but it's by Denise Brousseau, and it's called Ready to Be a Thought Leader? ? So I'm actually in the process of reading that one right now, because you never stop learning, right? Sometimes people say, how do you get where you are? Never stop asking questions. Always read, always learn. And it's not just textbooks. I know I'm being a bit verbose here, Chad, but it's not just textbooks. Go to the seminars, go to the consortiums, join groups like Execs in the Know and ask as many questions, ask them what they're reading. And go to as many seminars as possible on CX and thought leadership.
Excellent. And for our listeners, I'll make sure that we put that in the show notes, the names and the authors of all the books that Lorraine, you're very busy reading, by the way. So I don't know when you sleep in between, but good luck with the continued night reading, and let us know how some of those books turn out and continued recommendations for us. It really, there's so much coming to mind, Lorraine. I wish I could ask you, and based on the little bit of time we have, but if I really, again, I'm going to keep pressing because I think about inspirational leadership. I think about really true female leaders that have impacted our industry in so many different ways. As I said, we've been very, very blessed with that abilities. What advice, recommendations, suggestions would you want to give? And I know it's a big question, but again, any nuggets? I'm looking for some nuggets that I'm listening to this show I could take away.
Absolutely. So, within CX, there's really, depending upon what methodology you subscribe to, there's anywhere between 6 and 8 different disciplines. Find the discipline that you're most passionate about. And really become the expert in that. I think people become leaders, especially women in leadership, by capitalizing on their passion. And quite frankly, people sometimes think women are a little bit more nurturing. Tap into that. Whether it's true or not, it's a perception out there. So make sure you use that to your advantage. Pick the discipline, be passionate, nurture yourself and others. Always be true to yourself. And then I guess the main message about, how do you move up? I always say I've got 3 Ps that I subscribe to, and it's, procure, passion, and perseverance. So procure is always learn, always ask questions, read as much as possible. Passion, you have to be passionate about what you're doing, or you won't be as successful as you can be. I'm not saying you won't be successful, but you will always be much more successful if you're passionate about what you do. And then the last is perseverance, right? Because, the world is not an easy place, whether it's the outside in your personal life or in the workforce. There are always things that are working against you, and you will always have to persevere. And I think that perseverance is what gets you to that last step on the ladder.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that the recording's there and some good thought perspective, Lorraine, that you've shared. I'm going to end on this, and one last quick one, and why I have you as a thought leader. In 2020, or even maybe 2022, or it's not around the corner, I'd like to get a quick prediction, and just something in the state of our industry, kind of with the continued customer success and movement taking place. Any predictions that you want to just throw out there in the next 2-3 years?
Absolutely. I think if you, subscribe to the old Gartner hype curves, I think we are about to see that hype and the curve accelerate in our maturity 3 to 4x over the next 5 years. And by that, I mean that the strides in technology, the strides in how people approach CX are going to grow by leaps and bounds. And along with that comes a new set of customer expectations. But I truly believe that the hard work that we've all put in over the last 10 plus years is really going to move exponentially within the next 3 to 5 years.
All right, you heard it first. I've got that documented on audio. We'll have to replay this in 2-3 years. Again, you've been listening to Lorraine Schumacher with Clarabridge. For all of our listeners, I will say this, and I'll continue to say it, hashtag get involved. Execs in the Know is your community advocate. There are so many leaders like Lorraine and others that are willing to share help in your journey of success. Get involved. I would encourage you to subscribe to Customer Driven. Feel free to rate this, subscribe, visit our website, Execs in the Know. We really are your community advocates. Lorraine, on behalf of myself, you've been a tremendous, and I appreciate your time, guest. And keep doing the passion. You never can retire. You're going to have to stick around a long time like me. You never can retire. You and I are going to be around in a long time here, but keep doing what you're doing and keep the love and the spirit. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You as well. You guys all have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Customer Driven with Chad McDaniel. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to rate and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. It really makes a difference in helping others find the podcast. For more information on our customer experience community, please visit execsintheknow.com.